Today I'd like to talk about the concept of modernizing workplace learning. Now I think, when we talk about the idea of modern workplace learning, I don't think our industry has really arrived at what does that concept mean for us. And I know that I've spent a lot of the last 15 years really working with a variety of large organizations trying to figure out how do we make learning better and what does it really mean to deliver learning in a way that's truly modern and truly engaging for our workforce. And I know that in one particular instance, I was brand new to an organization. I walked into the organization and the senior vice president, the first thing they said to me was, I really need you to modernize our approach to learning. And that's all they said. That was the entire request, was I really want you to modernize what we're doing here. And that left me scratching my head just a little bit because they didn't give me any context. I was new to the organization. I didn't really know what learning meant here at all, yet alone what it really took to modernize workplace learning. And I think it's disconnects like this, where we're being asked to do things that we really don't have a solid understanding of what does that mean to our stakeholders and to the employees that we're trying to support, that really challenges the reputation of learning and development. And if you talk to your employees and talk to the folks that we're trying to support, we're really challenged nowadays with proving the value of learning and development in a modern workplace. And that starts to make me think about a variety of different questions. First of all, what should workplace learning look like today? And not only that, but how do we keep up? The nature of business is moving so quickly and we're not in command at all. We're like the coyote in the cartoon where we're constantly chasing the needs of the workplace and we're never going to be able to catch up because we're not in control. We're not defining what is important to the business today. We're trying to do our best to support that need. So how do we evolve what we're doing? How to really, transition to this concept of modern learning? And does it mean that we have to throw everything that we've been doing away? And in my opinion, that's not the case. I don't think this is about completely trashing the concept of what you would call traditional workplace learning. I think it's really about a refurbishment project. It's about taking the old concepts and the old ideas that maybe are starting to fade away a little bit, or maybe have never really delivered the value that we're looking for, and putting a little bit of a shine on them with a new approach or a new mentality to how we can support people in the workplace. And I think that really starts with building a better foundation. Because I think part of the challenge with the concept of modernizing workplace learning is that modern is a moving target. What's modern today from a technology or a principle or any type of perspective might not be modern 6 months from now. It might not be modern next week. So how do we really establish a set of foundational principles that allows our approach to not only modernize, but to really grow with the business and grow with the needs of our people? So that's what I'd like to talk about today and really address 9 principles that I have found in my work and that my organization has found as part of the Axonify team that really helps us not only create a better working environment and better learning experience, but it's something that can really grow and stretch with the organization and ultimately prove the value of L&D in the modern workplace. And when we look at these 9 principles and I talk about the concept of value, that's where we're going to start. So principle number 1, identify measurable business outcomes first. You have to work with the end in mind. And when we talk about the value of workplace learning to our stakeholders, we're used to traditional metrics, things like completions and consumption behaviors and things like that. But ultimately, we have to speak in the value proposition in the terms that they most value, most understand themselves. So for me, that starts with working backwards. So we really have to take a look at what are the outcomes we're looking to achieve within our business as learning and development, and then start working back. So based on the measurable outcome we want our people to achieve, what do they have to be able to do? What are those behaviors that are essential to reaching that outcome, whether it be increased sales or improved customer service scores or declined safety incidents or whatever it may be. So once we know the outcome and what they have to be able to do, what is that core knowledge? What do they have to know in order to execute on those behaviors? And then finally, what is the content that we have to provide in order to enable that knowledge that then takes the rest of the pattern and really pushes those outcomes that are truly measurable in the business and will truly define the value of learning for our partners across the enterprise. So for one, we have to start with those measurable outcomes first before we then dig into how do we support, what are our strategies, and ultimately what is the right content that we have to provide. Our second principle, leverage the science of learning. Learning is an inherently human process, right? And it's challenging when you think about how do people learn and how does the brain work and all of these different ideas. But we really have to distill this concept down and bring the humanity back to learning. And that starts with first rejecting various scientific principles or different ideas around the science of learning that have been proven false, or there just hasn't been any solid proof that it actually works. And replacing those ideas with tried and true concepts and principles that really leverage the realities of the science of learning. For example, the concept of spaced repetition. While it may be a little bit of a complicated scientific principle, the simple reality that the more often you're exposed to content, the more likely you are to retain that information. And leveraging that and building the concept of spaced repetition or a drip approach to learning into what we do every day. And a second example would be retrieval practice. I think we've all crammed for the exam the night before, and then when you took the exam, you probably got a decent score. But then what happened a week or 2 weeks later, and did you remember the information? So really, taking advantage of that, again, common sense idea that we've all experienced and use a better strategy. So the concept of retrieval practice and asking questions and getting people to use the information and the knowledge that we're imparting them with every day so they can truly retain it over time and not, turn back to behaviors that we know ultimately don't work. So really return the humanity to learning and leverage the science as a foundational principle of what we do. Our next principle, integrate social and collaborative learning opportunities. I think there are a lot of times where we look at a modern learning strategy, especially technology-enabled learning, and we may accidentally turn it into an isolating experience. And if you think about e-learning as a great example, where people are sitting in front of a machine by themselves for who knows how long, and they're learning. We know just based on experience that learning is truly a social concept and that we learn best when we learn from one another and we leverage one another's experiences and ideas. And that's just the nature of the modern workplace. We've gone from a centralized model where information comes from one person and distributes to the many into a truly distributed workforce with knowledge moving in ways that are often unpredictable. So how do we leverage that concept and the way the technology enables a distributed knowledge workplace in what we're doing and really bring people together and allow for opportunities for people to collaborate and experience true social learning, whether it's in a technology-enabled learning or other types of learning. Embrace familiar modern technology. I'm often confused by the disconnect between learning at home and learning at work, because I don't know if you're like me, but at home, I almost never have a problem I can't solve or information that I can't find. If I'm not a plumber, but if the pipe under my kitchen sink broke, I wouldn't have to go to plumbing school in order to fix it, right? You Google how to fix broken pipe, and then you find the right information, use the right resources in order to solve the problem. But then you go to work and you try to figure out how many vacation days you get, and you have to send 14 emails to 7 different subject matter experts, and then you never get the answer. So how do we merge those two experiences so that people can learn at work just like they learn at home every day? And at home, you have this great technology, some of the best pieces of technology ever created that are kind of helping you solve those problems or connecting you to the right people and the right information. And I'm not saying it's about bringing Google or Wikipedia or YouTube directly into the workplace, and you have to use those in order to make this work. But I think it's about what are the behaviors that people are leveraging in platforms like that? For example, how are they leveraging search to solve their everyday problems? And how do we take that same concept and apply that to what we're doing so that when they solve a problem at home and at work, there's a similarity to it where they can leverage those existing behaviors and not have to relearn how to learn at work. Next up, we have offer learning in the moment of need. We front load a lot of what we do as learning and development during onboarding or during a role transition. But where does the rubber really meet the road with regards to what people do every day? And it's often that point of indecision. When I'm challenged with a particular customer issue or something is going wrong, and now I have to apply that information that maybe I haven't applied for a long time, and I can make a decision that's either going to gain a customer or we're going to lose a customer, or I'm going to go home safe and sound at the end of the day, or maybe I'm going to get hurt this time. And often I think we ignore this as learning and development. So I think one of the, again, foundational principles of a modern approach is being there when we are truly needed so we can help people solve those high-value problems that are often what cause issues for us in our business and ultimately for the employee and the customer experience. Make learning part of every day. This is already true. Learning is part of every day, no matter what, because, again, learning is inherently human. So when people are on the job, they're already learning, whether it's through something that we provide or something that they're doing on their own. And I think this is really a question of how do we leverage that and recognize this fact and take advantage of it and not put all of our investment in the 10% of formal learning when, if you're a fan of the 70-20-10 concept and framework, the reality that 70% of that learning is happening in the flow of the work, but not necessarily being supported or enabled by organizations like learning and development. So how do we shift our attention and really enable those experiences that are already taking place and capture some of that great experience and great learning and leverage that in what we're doing every day? Create personal and adaptive learning experiences. I think a lot of organizations, there's a balancing act where you have to take a look at the concept of scalability. So can we provide something to everyone and really cover everyone? So the concept of coverage. And at the same time, how do we personalize? So how do we make sure that it's a unique experience that's truly meaningful to me? And I think in a lot of organizations, scalability beats personalization. And too often we try to cover everyone and check boxes, but we don't create experiences that are truly meaningful for an individual. So how do we leverage not just strategy, but the right technology to deliver truly personalized, adaptive experiences so that the right person gets the right content at the right time, and every time we engage is a truly valuable experience versus just the concept of, covering for the sake of covering a concept with the audience. Make learning more engaging. I don't know about you, but when I experience traditional content, especially e-learning, this is what I tend to look like. So I don't know at what point we lost the concept that learning can actually be fun, and if not fun, particularly engaging. And when we take a look at concepts like spaced repetition and the science of learning, and we're asking people to engage with different types of content in different ways, and potentially more often now, how do we make sure that it's truly an engaging and meaningful experience? So taking a look at concepts like casual gameplay or gamification and game mechanics, so that when people engage with learning content, learning technology, it's something they truly want to do and not something that's being forced upon them or required of them. And finally, our last principle, deliver learning using a variety of formats. I think a lot of people search for that perfect format. Should this message be delivered in text, or should it be a video, or what's the right way to do this? And I think that is too simple a question. I think there's a variety of considerations we have to take into account for how can people potentially use content in order to learn or solve a problem. Because again, back to that pipe scenario, if you Google, how do I fix a broken pipe? You're going to find videos, you're going to find articles, you'll find a variety of different types of content, and then the person at the right time can use the right content in order to solve the problem in a way that's meaningful for them. So some things to take into consideration when you're thinking about what's the right content mix or the right modality to deliver a piece of information. What's the context? How is this meant to be used? How may I use this as an employee in that moment of need? And then what format best associates or matches to that context? What's the right fit for the message? In some cases, a video may deliver the right type of emotion or overall type of context that may be missing in a text-based format. So what's the right fit in terms of method or modality for that particular message? Accessibility considerations. So what is the right modality to make sure that the maximum number of employees can access and use this content so that no one is being left out or left on the sidelines? And finally, back to engagement. So what is the right modality or the right possible mix of modalities that is going to really match that engagement strategy that you're looking for? So these are, to sum up, 9 different principles that for modern workplace learning that we think not only will provide a better learning experience and better types of content and technology mix for the modern employee, but will create a framework by which we can really grow with the organization so that it's not just about what is modern learning today and what works today, but truly something that we can grow and evolve with the organization and stay true to the same set of principles without constantly trying to redo and reimagine how learning works in this particular organization. So I know that was a really quick overview. I'd like to point you to an ebook that we've created with more than 50 practical tips of how you can bring these concepts to life. Some are technology-enabled concepts, and others are just simple ideas that you can use to start exploring with these principles in your organization to figure out, what's the right mix, or how does this particular principle come to life at your company. But some basic suggestions on how do you really get started. First, apply your context. So, I've spoken to principles that I think work across different organizations and across different use cases, but what's true of your organization? What's the reality of your workplace culture, and how does that match up against some of these principles? So first, apply your personal context as an organization. 2, build a scalable framework. So again, we're looking at what is the overarching look at learning or the holistic view of learning that's going to allow you to create repeatable tactics. that you can consistently apply to solve problems the right way each time so that your employees can have a predictable way in terms of how they're being supported. And when you ask them, how do they help you learn here? How do they help you do your job? They can actually have a consistent answer and not make it about each project and a moving target that really confuses the end user. Vet your strategy against your framework. So when there's a new ask or a new stakeholder request, constantly vetting those ideas or those new strategies against this consistent scalable framework to see does it fit, or is there a need to iterate potentially our framework because it's not necessarily meeting the current needs of the organization. And again, allow it to grow and flex as needed, but make sure you're constantly doing this vetting and this check so that you're consistent in the way that you're supporting your employees, regardless of what the problem may be today or next week or next month. And ultimately, to summarize, modern workplace learning is not just about technology. I think too often we think about the way that technology has evolved what we're doing every day and how work is done, and assume that this is a technology-based conversation. But in reality, it's about people. So how do we leverage these principles and the concept of modern learning, whether it be technology-enabled or not, to really keep up with the needs of our modern workforce and make sure that people are getting what they need in order to do their jobs better every day? So I'd like to thank you for your time today. Here's my contact information if you have any questions or would like to learn more. But those are our 9 essential principles for modernizing your learning ecosystem.